And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of New York State of Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Rick K here with you for episode 79, our last episode in February. As we get closer to March, spring training is in full effect. March Madness will be in full effect. We got so much to get into this afternoon. And of course, talking the Knicks, falling flat on their face against the two top teams in the East. Does that mean they're contenders, pretenders? What do you make of Tom Thibodeau? The Rangers, I guess they forgot you're supposed to play hockey when you come back from 4 Nations break. They give up 5 goals in Buffalo on Saturday in the first period. They ended up beating Pittsburgh yesterday. But what exactly are the Rangers? We get into a pivotal matchup Tuesday night in Long Island against the Islanders. The Nets win at the buzzer, and now if a win tonight would put them tied for the last play-in spot in the East. Who would have thought that? The Mets get a big injury in spring training. Just this morning with Sean Manaea. We'll dive into what that means for the rotation. Giancarlo Stanton's back in New York for the Yankees getting some tests. We'll talk about that. And the new facial hair policy now been lifted in New York. What does it exactly mean? I think my beard will hold up. But what do you think? St. John sweeps UConn. Getting the college basketball coming up at the top of the hour at 1 o'clock when the AP poll comes out. And we'll talk MLS. NYCFC gets the result. The Red Bull Blues in Cincy, and we'll have Charles Bone from MLSsoccer.com to help preview the two locals this year. It's all coming up next on New York State Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all the sports. We will see you in just 30 seconds. And again, welcome back to New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Episode 79. I am thrilled to have you here today. It's a nice day here in New York. It's actually 50 degrees, which is different from the cold we've had the last couple weeks. Want to remind you, of course, you can follow us on X, IG, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Just search at IE Sports Radio. If you're listening here on YouTube, like and subscribe. All of our videos are there. Our live shows are there. So be sure to check that out. Each of our show pages, iesportsradio.com/New York State of Sports. We're updating the website. It's fantastic. If you miss any portion of the show or you just want to hear me again, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, you check that all out. As soon as the live episode is over, it goes right to those platforms. Want to remind you, you can follow me on X at Rickinator555, or you can follow the show on X at NY State Sports IE. And join the conversation. I want to hear from you. Feel free to, if you're listening here on YouTube, or go to the YouTube link and comment along. I'd love to hear from you guys throughout the show. You can also email me, rickjkeeler@gmail.com. Always happy to get your comments over the course of the week if you missed any portion of today. Taryn Rodriguez is in the house. Taryn, how are you? Glad to have you aboard. So we'll take a quick time out. We're going to hear from our sponsors, and we'll come back and talk two New York teams that really fell flat this weekend. We'll mix the basketball and the hockey into one with the Knicks and the Rangers. You're listening to New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all their sports. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
IE Sports Radio fans, this show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
rise and shine. It's 4 a.m. The stars are still out. The sun is beneath the horizon, but it's time to punch in and go to work. The comfort of your warm-ups turns into the grinding out of your reps as the clinking and the clanking of the plates create a symphony of euphoria. There's no other feeling like it. Earn it, burn it, and take what's yours. IE Sports Radio has proudly partnered with Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but also promotes and donates to mental health research. Use our code IESR to get 15% off their comfortable and inspiring gym wear and help them on their amazing journey to support mental health. Go hard, take part in your iron therapy, and be strong. Because when your mental health is as strong as you are, there's no telling how far you'll go.
Hey there, IE Sports Radio fans. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Seal the Deal Wax Seals by Cecilia B. You just finished your very own wedding or baby shower invitations and you're looking for that extra special touch? Maybe you just wrote a letter to a relative or a friend and you want to add to their smile when they receive it. Then seal the deal with Cecilia's handmade sealing wax stamps for your invitations, letters, and gifts. You bring the deal, we'll bring the seal. You can find them on Instagram at sealthedeal_wax stamps and on Facebook, Seal the Deal Wax Seals.
For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
And of course, thanks to our awesome sponsors here at IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sport. Plant Jerky, Premium Brisket, Beef Jerky. Get those orders in for March Madness because you're going to be watching some college basketball. You're going to need some snacks. That's what Planet Jerky, Premium Brisket, Beef Jerky can do for you. Of course, Vital Apparel. Mental health awareness is very important. Get some awesome apparel for when you go to the gym and, of course, support a great cause. Seal the Deal Wax Seals for all those wedding invitations, parties, all that good stuff. And, of course, check out all of our shows here at IE Sports Radio. Also, our other sponsor, Raw Nutrition Supplements. Go to getrawnutrition.com. And you can use promo code IESR, and you get 10% off of your purchase. So be sure to check that out today. And we thank all of those companies for sponsoring this great network. So let's talk Knicks first. Oh, by the way, first before we do Knicks, I want to remind you, of course, about our supporters club. It's very important. Each show has one. So for $5 a month, here at New York State Sports. If you support the show, if you love the show, and I appreciate all of you who do listen and take time out of your day each and every week, you can pick the theme of the show. You can do a team-specific episode, whatever episode you would like to hear. That'll be in the cards. And if you want to be a guest on that episode, you can come on the show as well and be a part of it. So I'm offering that $5 for each month. Support the show. Maybe we'll do some specific themed episodes as well. Maybe post games. We get toward the postseason and things like that. The special episodes for different events. So be sure to check out the Supporters Club today. Now let's talk Knicks. This was supposed to be a litmus test for the Knicks coming out of the All-Star break, playing 3 games in 4 days, and 2 of them against the top 2 teams in the East. Now, before that, they play the Bulls. They win in overtime. Bridges gets a key block. Bulls, though, like 19 of 48 from 3. Not really the performance you want from the Knicks playing an overtime game before you go to Cleveland on a back-to-back. And it was an absolute nightmare. The Knicks go to Cleveland. They lose 142-105. Cavaliers make dunks on each of the first 4 possessions of the game. Cleveland as a team shoots 61%. 61%. You don't see that in the NBA that often. Shoots 51% from 3. You get out-rebounded 47-32. You got out-toughed by the Cavs. Evan Mobley with 21 points, Donovan Mitchell with 27, 19 off the bench from Ty Jerome. Like, it was just all Cleveland all day. Remember, the Cavs beat the Knicks earlier in the year, but at least it was a close game going to the fourth quarter. So you're trying to shake that off. You go to Boston. The Knicks have been embarrassed twice by the Celtics this year. Chance to make a statement, and you get down 20 in the first quarter, and you lose 118-105. Celtics shoot 49.5% from the floor. Tatum with 25, Brown with 24. Derek White almost has 20. He finishes with 19. Porzingis has 15. Knicks end up getting out-rebounded 49-40. Just an absolute mess of a game. You have Cat getting hobbled in the fourth quarter, down 18, comes back into the game, which, again, that's a criticism of Tom Thibodeau, is, okay, at that point when Cat's hobbled, why is he coming back? And I don't care if Cat wants to come back. The game's over. No reason to do that. So when you look at the Knicks right now, it's probably a weird team to look at. They're 37-20, but they're 0-7 against the top 3 teams in the league: Cleveland, Boston, and Oklahoma City. Keep in mind, this was a team that was built to beat the Boston Celtics, to beat the reigning NBA champions. And it hasn't happened. It's an absolute mess. And you look at what this team is, all right, it's the 3rd best team in the East. But at the same time, when the 2 teams are that much ahead of you, because you saw Cleveland is that much ahead of you. The Knicks do not have any front court depth because we haven't seen Mitchell Robinson back yet. They don't have any 3-point defense because you got these teams like the Celtics and the Cavs and even the Bulls shooting threes left and right. And a Tom Thibodeau calling card is usually defense. The Knicks can score, but when you look at the Celtics games, they played the Celtics 3 times this year. The average margin of victory is 21 points. 21 points. They're not even competitive with Boston, where I could say, hey, a possession here or there, a made basket here could change things. No. And that's the sad reality. It's okay. The Knicks ceiling is a second round. And that begs the question, if you're going to go out there and say, okay, is Tom Thibodeau good enough to get this group past a certain point, or do they need somebody else? Because the core is not changing. And I think next year, with Bridges and Anunoby and Cat and Hart, now that they've played together for a full year, it makes a lot of sense. Now, they'll play Cleveland 2 more times. They'll play Boston in April. So you'll get to see again. But there's nothing this team has shown you that's going to go make a run at a championship. You can win 50 games, but the Knicks have won 50 games. I think now we've set the expectation. We've set the standard. And that's what it is. They don't have a bench. They got 15 points from their bench yesterday from 3 players: Payne, McBride, and Shamet. Achua didn't give him anything. Again, you're still waiting on Mitch Rob. And I know they didn't have OG. They didn't have Josh Hart Friday. But just because you don't have Josh Hart and just because OG just came back doesn't mean you lose by 37 points. Like, if you were at least competitive at Cleveland, I can make that argument. Okay, it is what it is. Something like that. They're good enough to win the first round. They'll win their first round series because they can score. They can score with anybody. Right now, they would play the Pistons. I know the Pistons have beat the Knicks a couple of times this year, but I think New York in a playoff series can get by. But if you're going to go up in that class, doesn't matter. If Indiana passes you, right? The Knicks are 4 games ahead of Indiana for the 3 seed. If Indiana passes you, you play Cleveland. You think you can beat Cleveland? You think you can beat Boston? Because the numbers tell you different. And even if the Knicks were to, let's say, steal a game on the road, you look at Cleveland and Boston right now. Cleveland is 20-6 away from home. Boston is 23-6 away from home. Those two teams are built differently. Kenny Atkinson has done a heck of a job in Cleveland, and the Celtics are the Celtics. So when you look at the Knicks as a whole, they are not good enough. They didn't build their depth enough. They didn't do a couple things enough. And again, this could all change. But for right now, as we sit here on February 24th, this team is not built for a championship. They're lacking the depth pieces. They're lacking defense, which is weird for a Tom Thibodeau team to lack defense. Like, I would understand if the offensive chemistry was struggling and things like that because it's a new group. They've clicked offensively. They just can't stop anybody now. And that's a far cry from last year's team. Knicks this week will play Philly at home on Wednesday. It's an ESPN game at 7 o'clock. And then they are at Memphis on Friday. Really good matchup with the Grizzlies, considering what John Morant's doing. The Grizzlies are 37-20 as well. That'll be a good test out in Tennessee. And then they will play at Miami on Sunday to begin March. And you look at March for the Knicks, you want to talk some tough games. They have a stretch from like March 4th to March 7th. Golden State, who's playing much better with Jimmy Butler. Lakers with LeBron and Luka, and then the Clippers, who are playing well. They have Golden State again on the road March 15th. And then they have the Clippers again at home March 26th, Milwaukee on March 28th. Dallas you would throw in there, but again, Dallas isn't healthy. So but the Knicks have some really tough March games with some Western Conference opponents. We know they can beat the West outside of Oklahoma City. We've seen it. So I'm not sure if these are tests. They're more quizzes because they failed the midterm. The Knicks can pass all the pop quizzes all you want, but in the end, if you fail the midterm, it does not matter. We'll talk about the Nets in a little bit, but let's stick with the other inconsistent New York team, and that's the Rangers. And we'll talk about the Four Nations stuff a little bit later when we get to a great anniversary that happened over the weekend. Rangers go to Buffalo. They have 2 games this weekend with Buffalo and Pittsburgh, the games they should play well and should get close to the playoffs. And you go out there and you not only lay an egg, that egg was over easy, scrambled, whatever you want to talk about it, to go down 5-0 in the first period with Igor Shesterkin playing goaltender is unacceptable. To lose a game 8-2. 8-2. What were I know a lot of these guys were in Four Nations break. They were playing in those games, and they played miserably, by the way. Like, I don't think any local really shined on this stage that way that you saw other players do that. Maybe Jesper Bratt for Sweden for the Devils was the closest one. But you look at the Rangers, and they just were flat and terrible. And Peter Laviolette's calling out effort. I've seen him call out effort 3 or 4 times this year. And his response was, well, I can't bench everybody. Well, you got to try. That just sounds like a coach that just resigned to the fact that this team is not good enough. And that's on the players. I don't want to hear, they don't hear the coaching staff. They won't respond to this guy. They've had 3 different coaches to respond to. 3 different coaches. And you cannot come out and play a game like that against anybody, much less Buffalo, who the Rangers by points are better than. Then they go to Pittsburgh yesterday. They played the Penguins. Penguins the day before lost 8-3 to the Capitals in a game where Alex Ovechkin didn't score. And the Rangers start off, it's tied in the first period. Second period was absolutely abysmal. Pittsburgh had like 7. Pittsburgh yesterday outshot the Rangers 39-16. I think 20 of those shots were in the second period. And the Rangers had none for the first 15 minutes. Somehow they got out of that period up a goal when JT Miller scored. Pittsburgh then scores 2 goals in the first 3 minutes of the third period. Jimmy Vesey then scores his 100th career goal, ties the game. Adam Fox scores to give him the lead. Then Miller gets an empty netter. Second, Rangers get a 5-3 win. Will Borgia, by the way, made a heck of a stop in front of Igor to preserve the lead late in the game. And the Rangers get 2 points. They're 2 points out of a playoff spot, which is very hard to believe. But you have 12 days to the trade deadline. What is this team? And to me, the message is it's not worth investing into. Because if they had gone out there and they'd beaten Buffalo. I'm not talking about blowing them out. I'm talking about winning 3-2. You get a win, you feel good about yourself. You get 2 wins, you feel good about yourself. Coming off of beating Columbus before the Four Nations break. And they just don't have that stretch in them. And to me, what that game showed the other day, they're not tough enough. They're not tough enough. And I'm not talking physically. I'm talking mentally. Mentally, they're not tough enough. Like, I want to see this team respond. And for a team that had Stanley Cup expectations, they're not playing like it. Now, they switched up the lines yesterday. Chris Kreider was scratched. Maybe they found something yesterday with scoring the 5 goals. But the time will tell. But right now, it's just a bunch of inconsistency. I'm not really sure how you fix that. Leading to a major swing game Tuesday at 7:30. Rangers, Islanders at UBS. Right now, the Rangers sitting on 60 points. The Islanders sitting on 57. Ottawa and Columbus right now are tied for the second and final wildcard spot with 62. Boston has 61, but they played one more game. Islanders have played one fewer game than the Rangers, so they have kind of the upper hand there. And when you look at this matchup and you look at the Islanders played pretty well last night. They lost 4-3, a hat trick by Jason Robertson for the Dallas Stars. There was a call that they weren't happy about toward the end of that game, but you had Engvall get a goal, Palmieri in the second to tie it. Then Duclair, with halfway through the third, had cut it to a 1-goal deficit. But you look at this Islander team, like at 25, 24, and 7, they've lost 3 in a row, dating back to the Four Nations break. Their schedule is a little bit tougher, but they have swing games too. Rangers tomorrow, Boston on Thursday, who's ahead of them. And then the Islanders, again, the Rangers, Nashville at home on Saturday, then the Rangers again at the Garden next week. So we'll kind of see where these two teams are at. Keep in mind, these two teams haven't played since November 3rd. Rangers won 5-2. They will play 3 times the rest of the year, starting tomorrow. Those can be huge games. I don't see both these teams making the playoffs. I think only one's going to. So we'll see. Islanders are trying to get healthy. Rangers are trying to find their form. In the end, we'll see what happens. Besides the Islanders, the Rangers this week have the Maple Leafs. That's a home game on Friday. Maple Leafs on 72 points, one of the better teams in the league. And then they have Nashville on Sunday. So Nashville goes to UBS Saturday, goes to the Garden Sunday. And Nashville got the doors blown off them by the Devils last night, 5-0. So you'd have to think that's a winnable game for the Rangers. Nashville's not any good, although I think the Predators beat them earlier this year. I'd have to double check that. Yeah, Nashville won 2-0 back on December 17th. So we'll have to see what happens. But very disappointed with the Rangers doing. And getting JT Miller is not enough to get this team to the playoffs. They need more JT Millers out there to have a shot. Looking around the league really quickly, I got to give a lot of credit to the Nets. Great performance in Philly. And it was weird because you talk about the Nets. You're watching that game. Sixers want to win. Sixers want to feel like they're in good form. Nets don't want – there are fans of the Nets, we talked about it last week, that don't want to win. And they want those lottery picks. They want that top pick. They're not getting it because I think, to me, they're too good to get it. And they have 6 players out tonight, by the way, against Washington. But to go out there, Nick Claxton, who, congratulations to him, is going to be the father of a little girl, which is fantastic. Nets got a 10-point lead in the first quarter. Cam Johnson at 23 on Saturday night. Philly got 31 from Tyrese Maxey, but Claxton, 16 points, 9 boards. He has done a really good job for his team in the paint. You've seen Trenton Wofford had 16 off the bench. Day'Ron Sharp had 10. Look, this is just a gritty Nets group with Jordy Fernandez. And again, if they beat the Wizards tonight, they are tied with the Bulls for the 10th seed in the East. I mean, who would have thought Brooklyn would try to tear it down, would play themselves in a play game? And I've seen fans today, and you kind of hope that maybe the karma of not trying to tank is going to help the Nets in the long run. Remember, they still have a ton of picks. Like, that's where it's like your future isn't tied to one pick. Now, you can say you get you a superstar, but the Nets have other ways. They got cap space. They've got multiple picks. Look what the Thunder are doing. And they play the Thunder on Wednesday at home. But you get to see kind of Oklahoma City at first glance and their defense and what it takes for them to win. So the Nets have the Wizards tonight. They're 2.5-point favorites in that game. Thunder at home on Wednesday. Portland at home on Friday, winnable game. And then at the Pistons on Saturday. Then they have the Spurs coming up next week who don't have Victor Wembanyama. So we'll see what happens. Good job by the Nets. And then finally, as we wrap up this first segment, Devils. And that's what I was talking about. Like, I don't blame, like, when I look at the Rangers' inconsistent play the other day, and then people say, oh, the Four Nations with guys retired, they just played on Thursday. Jack Hughes played Thursday, and Jack Hughes had 2 goals in Saturday against Dallas. They didn't win, but Jack Hughes played well. Nico Hischier is back. Now, they did have to put Markstrom on IR, so they do have to see what happens in goaltending, but Nico Dawes did a good job last night against Nashville, got himself a shutout. So that was a good performance. Last night, a 5-0 win, as we mentioned. 3 assists for Hischier. No center power play goal. Doug Hamilton had a goal. Palat had a goal. And the Devils, looking at their stretch right now coming up this week as we head into March, they have Colorado on Wednesday. That game is on the West Coast. At Utah on Saturday. At Vegas on Sunday. We're going to Dallas next week. So a little bit of a road trip here for the Devils. As they stand right now, they are tied with the Carolina Hurricanes for the number 2 seed in the East, the Metropolitan Conference, at least, Metropolitan Division, 6 points ahead of Detroit. If you're looking at it from a wild card perspective, it's about a 3-game lead. So the Devils have kind of built themselves a nice cushion over there. So coming up after the break, we'll do some MLS soccer in our third segment, technically, because coming up, you're going to hear my conversation with Charles Boehm. He's a national writer for MLSsoccer.com. We previewed the NYCFC season. We previewed the New York Red Bulls season. We talked about some non-MLS or non-local MLS storylines as well. I'm excited for you guys to hear this interview. Charles gave some great insight, and then we will recap what happened with those 2 teams as well coming up. You're listening to New York State Sports and IE Sports Radio. You will hear my interview with Charles Boehm after the break.
What's up, everybody? This is Taryn Rodriguez. Are you a fan of volleyball? Are you a fan of Thunderous Spikes? Then I have the show for you, Set Point, where I cover NCAA men's and women's volleyball, high school boys and girls volleyball, beach volleyball, and even professional volleyball. Catch the action every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daryl Kinsey Jr., and I'm welcoming you to take another lap with the fastest show on IE Sports Radio. Yes, this is the Extra Mile with me and my co-hosts Christopher Lehman and Michael Ward. We talk everything racing from NASCAR to IndyCar to Formula One to limited hydroplanes, endurance racing, the NHRA, and more. So come join us for an hour of great racing talk and a lot of fun as well on the Extra Mile, Thursdays at 8 p.m. only on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to New York State of Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. It is MLS opening weekend this week, and joining me to talk about NYCFC, and New York Red Bulls. You can find his work on MLSsoccer.com. Charles Boehm is here. Charles, how are you today?
I'm well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Happy to have you. So before we get into some specifics and particulars, what are the expectations for the 2 New York teams this year? Both getting to the playoffs last year, both facing each other in the playoffs last year, but a couple of different, both teams taking some new looks this year.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I actually think there's a lot of TBA on one side, on the blue side with NYCFC. I was writing about them a little bit yesterday because they're going to be in the national, or I should say global spotlight, visiting Inter Miami for their season opener tomorrow night. And there's so many questions. They've got, I would say, probably their best player, their most proven attacking contributor, Santi Rodriguez, is but not officially yet, but by multiple reports and his own statements on camera is going to get sold. Is about to move to Brazil in what's going to be a big transfer deal in terms of the money that NYCFC will get, but it opens up a huge hole in the attack and really the identity of the club. And then there's a couple of injuries that have starters out for tomorrow at least, and I think some holes in the roster in general. So I have a little bit of concern, a little bit of questions about what we can expect from New York City. And then on the other side, Red Bulls are hoping to keep that momentum from the Cinderella playoff run that they had. I think right now the big question is Choupo-Moting going to be an upgrade on Dante Van Zier? And we'll have to see there. But I think probably a little bit more to feel good about over there at New York Red Bulls.
So you mentioned Santi Rodriguez, the reported transfer to Brazil, $17 million, ton of money, as you said. This is a team that already was lacking a lot of significant attack outside of two guys last year and all those second half collapses it seemed to have. So how do they fill that void if it's fillable?
We don't. That's just it. I don't have an easy answer for that, other than to say that City have invested a ton of money, kind of over a span of 2 years or so now, or maybe even going back further, on young talent, and they have the advantage of the City Football Group's global network, the relationships, the scouting infrastructure there, and that all counts for a lot. But there's been some misses and some TBDs in terms of those players shaking out to become reliable contributors. I think probably if there's NYC fans listening right now, they're going to point to maybe an older player who's been disappointing and frustrating by and large since he came to MLS, Munsef Bakar. He still has a lot to prove. I think he can still be a strong contributor to the team. He's got all the tools. It's just that he has not produced in terms of end product to match the skill set. So, that's one to watch there. I think you're hoping that some of the other young guys are going to come through. Ojeda is an example. And then if you look at the central midfield, when it's going well, like in, the past couple of years, they've had one of the best central midfields in terms of tempo setting, possession, fluidity with Keaton Parks. Andres Pereira is going to be another one to watch this year. And then, again, the James Sands situation is just really, really awful. I feel bad for everybody involved. He was off to a great start at his loan at St. Pauli. It certainly looked to me like he was set to be a regular starter for them in the Bundesliga down the stretch. Does his ankle is out till it seems like June at least, and I think that's going to complicate. What is he like when he comes back? And that's a big character as well as a performer on the field for City. So I think, and then sorry, I should also mention Hannes Wolf too. Had a pretty good first year last season. There's always a question of how you can sustain it and then in the bigger picture, the longer term, maybe they've done pretty good work at the youth level. They've had a couple of good crops of homegrown players come through, kind of waiting to see who the next of it is going to be. And I don't think they're really maximizing that aspect of the club and that aspect of their player pipeline. So that's something else to watch over the course of the year.
So obviously the supporting cast is a little bit different than when Pascal Jansen took this job, but what can people expect from him as a coach? How different is it from the way Nick Cushing was coaching?
Yeah, another area where we have more questions than answers. I think my colleague over at MLS Soccer, Matt Doyle, the armchair analyst, has called NYCFC a black box recently because they don't necessarily publicize what they do. They're not always, I don't think, super eager to kind of get out into the media and tell their story. They're very much sort of within this larger network, and so the reasoning behind Pascal Jansen as a coach, that hire. I mean, if you look at his track record, his game model somewhat meshes with what we think City Football Group generally want to do with their clubs, but he's never coached in MLS before. This is his first time in North America. And there's always a limit on how much data you can really get out of preseason matches. So I'm very curious to see. He's been at some, I would say, mid-tier kind of clubs in Europe. There's been some quality soccer that he's produced at those destinations. So I think there's every reason to believe he could work. It's just an area of where we're at more conjecture maybe than certainty.
So moving over to the Red Bulls, you mentioned Choupo-Moting, and now you have Forsberg hopefully healthy, and Morgan not having to go to UEFA this year, which is I think hurt the team midpoint last year. What kind of impact can a veteran like Moting have on the squad?
Yeah, I think they want him to be a leader. He's getting on into his 30s now. I'll just leave it at that. He's been at big clubs, but hasn't been always been a regular big club. So when you look at his time at Bayern Munich and PSG, he was, he was fighting for minutes and was kind of more of a rotational player. And there's quality there, but again, it's the question is, do you sort of put an asterisk on his age because he hasn't necessarily been a high mileage player? He hasn't been racking up tons of minutes over, the last, almost a decade, really, at least a half a decade. And so, and then how does he adjust, right? That's always the question with imports. Even a high level player like him, who's been in big clubs, big environments in top 5 leagues, is he going to settle in off the field? Is he going to find stability and continuity in that part of his life, and then also figure out MLS because it's a very different kind of ball of wax than the leagues he's been playing in over in Europe. So I'm intrigued. I think, and I think people would have probably been a little more, I guess, excited or approving of the signing if he wasn't a designated player. But he's taking up one of those, precious 3 slots. And so that always inevitably, fairly or not, I mean, that raises expectations. That means that he's got to carry the team on some level and produce in terms of numbers, but also, leadership and be a little bit of a face of the club. So I think that the key is going to be him formulating a relationship with Forsberg. We saw how just the team is just a fundamentally different proposition when Forsberg is healthy and on the pitch. And that may be the biggest question, pending further arrivals or departures around RBNY. It's, can Forsberg kind of continue to lift the level of everyone around him? And what kind of understanding does that build with Choupo-Moting?
So you mentioned Forsberg and the defense kind of taking a little bit of a interesting move. John Tolkien transferring this offseason. What do you think of the expectations for this defense this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the playoff run was built on, right? I mean, this was a very tough team to play against in the postseason. They kind of, I think, Sandro Schwartz, the coach, kind of was tweaking with kind of how he wanted this team to play and what the identity was going to be. And you can almost go back to the Hudson River Derby where they got absolutely smoked by NYCFC. I think it was 5-1, if I'm remembering correctly. And from then on, I think he sort of reeled in the hopes to be more of an expansion, possession, ball dominant team, and just set out to be hard to play against. And wow, did it ever work? Eventually, it took a little while, but they found a rhythm. They found their self, I guess, in their sense of self in the playoffs. And I don't actually know if that's what he's going to want to do the whole season. Some would argue that maybe, you can't, it has to be sort of a switch that you flip on and off as needed. So I'm very curious to see that, because I think we saw signs earlier in the year that he wanted to be a little bit more assertive and have a little bit more of control of the game with the ball. So that's another aspect to this. And of course, hovering over everything, very interesting subplot here is Jurgen Klopp, just recently joined Red Bull Global as their kind of the multinational networks sort of ideas guy or sporting director. I know he visited the Red Bulls either earlier this month or he'll visit them later this month, but he's gonna kind of be a figure in the background and maybe having a little bit of influence in terms of how things work. So that's another thing to follow there.
So both these teams laden with veterans, but who are some young players that you're watching from both these teams?
Yeah, so I'll go back. So looking at NYCFC, first of all, I mean, Alonso Martinez, I kind of need to mention that name. He's not necessarily a young player per se anymore, but was the surprise success story around the club of late. Curious to see whether he's going to be competing with Bakrar for the starting job, or if they kind of find a way to get him on the field together. Ilinic is the fullback who's been very good at times, kind of waiting to see how he matures, if he can become a legit, top tier MLS two-way fullback. I think we're going to see more of Justin Hack, the homegrown, who's again, you could argue is not so young anymore, but he's come up through the club, through the academy, and as a player I like, and I think he's developed a lot of versatility. He's played both at center back and center midfield, and is one of those guys, kind of an MLS guy that you need to kind of help your team have a high floor, just being consistently effective week in, week out. Let me see who else. They've loaned out some of the underperforming guys, so you kind of got to put an asterisk on some of those. And then who else do we have here? And then again, another one who's not young anymore per club last year. And I thought he'd be kind of advancing into the national team picture maybe this year. We didn't see much of him in January camp, but key factor for the Red Bull, or for the Pigeons. So, and then if we switch over to Red Bulls, still going to be a very young team. Leaving, but again, like that's the Tolkien story. I think is just really cool because this is a kid who became a regular starter as a teenager. Proved himself at MLS level repeatedly over a number of seasons, and now he's playing in Bundesliga, one of the biggest leagues in the world, and looks at home. So that's a fun one. I think if you kind of talk about other guys who could maybe follow those to really find his feet until the last year or so, but I thought he was very, very good at times last year as a hardworking midfielder who can also do the pressing, but also provide a little bit of quality on the ball every now and then. So that's one there. I'm scrolling down the roster here to try not to miss anyone. And then I think we'll see hopefully more from Gengar. He was a U22 initiative player, a highly touted international coming in import last year, who I think needs to step up and show that he's figured out MLS and he's ready to be a consistent contributor. I think there's a lot of talent there. That we just need to see it again, week in, week out. And then there's another one I'm forgetting here. Oh, Sergio Goma is another one too. A homegrown player, really talented kid, has had some injuries, had some issues with consistency, but someone who I think can be at that kind of Tolkien level of prospect. So another one that I'll be watching.
I think the interesting thing, one of the guys from NYCFC, Nick Cavallo, would be somebody that you look at. A lot of people talk about with defense that he could be a guy that coming from the super draft to immediately make an impact. Is that happen that often? You see a guy drafted in MLS pretty high and then make an impact as a rookie. Can he have that impact on defense for them?
Yeah, this is something I kind of get on a soapbox about every now and again, because every year, and then it happens in the off season, in the first couple of months of the year, in the wintertime when the draft happens. Of course, the draft is not what it once was. It's not a core mechanism necessarily for getting talent in your club, because there's so many kids coming through academies. There's so many ways to bring in talent now from abroad, but as much as people talk about the irrelevance of the draft, every single year there's multiple surprises and breakout players and guys who become starters or even stars through that mechanism. And not to go too far off on the tangent, but like these two countries, really, if you look at US and Canada, so huge, so many kids playing soccer. It's so easy for players to fall through the cracks, whether they never get spotted or get an opportunity to get into a professional academy, or they're in a pro academy and it doesn't really shake out for them the first go round or when they're young, and then they have to go through the college route, or they have to take a kind of a different way to get to MLS. There's still quality that you'll find there. So I think everybody, especially when you look at a first round pick, they don't all pan out, but if you're looking at that first round, especially the upper half of the first round, those guys got selected there for a reason. And if they get the opportunity, sometimes you have to have things break in your favor. Maybe if you have injuries early in the season, or it's, when the summer comes and the matches start to stack up and you get international absences and that sort of thing. sometimes you need a door to open for you, but there's always a chance there. And I think it was Malachi Jones was the one who broke through for NYCFC last year before he got hurt. That's another one to watch there where, they just need a chance sometimes.
So looking into your crystal ball, I know it's really early, so we don't hold predictions on this show, but what are your predictions for the locals this year?
I hate predictions, especially in this league, man. This is a chaotic, parity-oriented league, so predictions are a fool's game. But I'll try. I think that both these teams are going to be in the playoff hunt. I mean, that's not going out on a limb when you look at the Red Bulls, right? Because they have a very impressive history of getting to the postseason. The question was always, what do they do when they get there? Well, now that they've done that, right? They actually made it to MLS Cup last year, and I think have more expectations as a result. But the East is so tough. I mean, you look at Miami, FC Cincinnati, Columbus Crew have lost a couple of weapons, but they're still an excellent team. Atlanta United spent crazy amounts of money this year to get back in the reckoning. Orlando City are a very tough out. They've done some good offseason business. So, before you've even sort of gotten down to the New York teams, you're already talking about like half or more than half the playoff field there. That seems like they've got a really good shot at contending for trophies, let alone reaching the playoffs. So I do think we're going to see some regression from City. I mean, NYCFC was in that kind of upper tier in the East for the last few years, and they may wind up there. I just don't know. I don't think we have enough clarity about what this team is going to look like. So speaking right now with what we know, I think both these teams are going to be kind of in that mid-table range where they're fighting to get in the playoffs, maybe fighting to get into the top half of the playoff bracket so they can host at least a first round game. And that's not a super sexy proposition, but that's actually ahead of where the Red Bulls were at the start of the playoffs last year, right? I think they were the 7 seed and they had one of the best lower seed runs ever. So sometimes you just got to get to the dance. And I think pending big summer reinforcements, which both these teams should be doing, there's resources available. The question is whether they deploy them and when. But I think we're talking about two clubs that should be in the elite year after year. And it's just this year they've got to prove it a little bit.
I think having the format that MLS Cup has benefits a veteran team like the Red Bulls, right? Where if you have that one and done, or even just 2 legs in some instances, as long as they get in, I mean, they have the veterans to win these games as we saw last year. So they'll have that belief if they get in, I would think.
Yeah, it used to be that you would see kind of a Cinderella run like theirs more regularly. In more recent years, the way things have shaken out is that home field advantage tends to matter a lot. So the Red Bulls really bucked a trend by being as good as they were on the road last fall. Is that replicable? That's the thing. And they showed that they had a superpower, right? And if you're going to do that, if you're going to create these upsets, you've kind of got to be elite in some level, even if you didn't necessarily show it in the regular season. And I think they did that with that defensive rigidity that they had, and the understandings and the control of space, even without the ball, that they showed in the playoffs was excellent. And again, I don't know that blueprint necessarily is what they're going to want to do or be able to do for an entire 34 game regular season. But again, if that's a switch you can flip on, then I think you have to look at them as a really tough tournament team.
So let's wrap it up with this: 30 years of MLS soccer. So it's a milestone year for the league. Let's go outside the New York bubble. There's sure plenty of things you're watching, but what are like 1 or 2 major storylines you're watching in the league?
Well, of course, the 30th year also has its 30th team, right? And so they're going to be one of the other kind of showcase matches this weekend is San Diego FC playing their inaugural match. They're visiting the LA Galaxy, the defending champs, on Sunday evening in the new Sunday night soccer slot. And it's a really interesting project in San Diego. So I've written about them a couple of times. They are trying to be, a local youth-driven project in the long run. They're building a really massive academy with a residential facility east of San Diego, and they've got a pretty unique advantage in that because they're within a certain radius of the U.S.-Mexico border. They actually kind of get to sidestep some FIFA regulations that govern when young players can cross national borders to go play in another country. So basically they can recruit, because they're so close to the border, they can recruit from both Mexico and the United States. So they want to be kind of a finishing school or a pipeline for the top young players in both Southern California and beyond in the United States and Mexico to come through their system. And then they're also connected to the Right to Dream Academy. So that's, we talk about the two New York clubs. This is kind of interesting to see this idea growing in a little bit of a different context, but just a quick background. Right to Dream is a program that was started in Ghana originally. And it's now it has sibling programs in Egypt and Denmark. So there's a club in Denmark where basically the idea is to give these young players, spot talented young players, mainly but not exclusively in kind of out of the way places like in Ghana and Africa, give them life skills as well as soccer training, and then give them education. You see a lot of Right to Dream products actually have come through MLS by coming to the US to get college scholarships or even high school scholarships. And so they are helping these kids kind of be functional and successful adults, whether they make it in soccer professionally or not. But then it's also turned out to be an extremely good engine for developing soccer talent. So Mohamed Kudus is one of the most common or most widely known products of this system, but they've made millions of dollars from transfer fees from producing these talents that are kind of diamonds in the rough. So now you take that model to MLS, they're going to be able to sort of pass players back and forth between the Danish sibling clubs and the other parts of the Right to Dream network. And then they're going to take the model, the principles, and apply them at their academy in San Diego. So it's going to take time for all that to get off the ground. In the meantime, they're kind of going to, I think, may struggle a little bit trying to build an MLS squad before they really have an academy that's pushing players through. But I think, it's just always interesting to see how a new city embraces an MLS team, what kind of crowds they get, what the vibes are. So that's another one. That's one I'm watching. And then of course we can't escape Inter Miami, right? If any listeners have Messi fatigue or Inter fatigue, I apologize, but they're still one of the big stories. Everything they do is under a bigger spotlight. Everything they do is kind of unprecedented in the sense of the scale and the scope of what they're doing in MLS. And, they won a supporter shield last year, but they absolutely face planted in the playoffs. And I think they've got something to prove. And I think we've already seen with how Leo Messi played in their first game, the CONCACAF Champions Cup game in Kansas City, where it was about 1 degree Fahrenheit on Wednesday night. I think Messi still has that edge to him. He wants to show that he's still the GOAT and he can boss this league like he's bossed almost every other league or environment he's ever been in. And so, it's kind of one more dance for those guys. And that's something we're going to be talking about all year.
So Charles, before we let you go, let the listeners know how they can follow you on social media and any work that you want to plug that you've been writing about.
Yeah, I think I'm in all the usual places, but probably the easiest spot to catch my work or my inane ponderings is on Blue Sky. I'm at CBOEHM. I've made the switch over from Twitter and the Hell site, and so I'm spending most of my social media time on Blue Sky. Look for my work there.
Be sure to check out Charles' work. Some really good stuff. Charles, thanks again for hopping on the show, and hopefully we'll talk again throughout the year. It's been a lot of fun.
Hey, Ricky, great to chop up with you.
So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. After this, you'll listen to New York State Sports and iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
How we doing, sports fans? This is Christian Harvey, your host of Gritsville, USA, your go-to show for all things Detroit and Michigan here on iSports Radio. Whether you're here for Gritty Lions talk, getting pumped up for the great Detroit sports renaissance, or hating on your neighbor depending on if they were green or blue, we got you covered. Whether you're in the East, West, or Central, we got you covered. Join me as we tackle through all that the great state of Michigan has to offer in the world of sports. Catch me, Christian Harvey, each week on Gritsville, USA, right here on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's happening, sports fans? Are you a fan of Southern California sports? Are you looking for a show hotter than a hot summer day in California? Then look no further than the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, where I talk about all things Southern California sports. That's right, all sports teams from Southern California. From the hard-hitting tackles of the NFL, to the killer crossovers and big three-pointers of the NBA and WNBA, to the grand slams of the MLB, to the bone-chilling goals of the NHL, and to the booming kicks of the MLS. The SoCal Supreme Sports Show has it all for you. Oh, and let us not forget about the college sports as well. So join me, Taryn Rodriguez, every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Welcome back to New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Ricky K here with you as we get close to 1 o'clock on the East Coast if you're listening live. And again, if you're on YouTube, please comment, get involved. Want to hear from you as well. Special thanks to Charles Bone from MLSsoccer.com, national writer for the league's website, for hopping on. We do appreciate that. Before we get into the results from this week, some really sad news that came across the wire right before we came on the air, actually. Probably great voices in New York broadcasting. Al Troutwig passed away at the age of 68, a couple of days before his 69th birthday. Alan Hahn, who you hear on ESPN Radio and you hear as the sideline reporter for the Knicks, broke the news on X. Al Troutwig is one of those voices synonymous with MSG, whether it's with the Knicks, Rangers. When the Yankees were on MSG in the 90s, there was a voice you always heard. If you're listening to the show and you're not from the New York area, you would hear Al Troutwig on the Olympics doing gymnastics. He's on auto racing, boxing, tennis. He's done did so many different sports. And one of the voices that I think when you think New York sports, Al Troutwig comes to mind. So our thoughts and prayers are with the Troutwig family. And if you could go on X and read some of the New York sports media personalities commenting over the last hour, some really good tributes that I would highly recommend you check out. So our thoughts and prayers with the Troutwig family at this time. So getting into the results from MLS real quick, NYCFC went down to Inter Miami and very surprising to get a tie. And I think that has to be very encouraging, especially like we talked about. It's one of those unknowns going down there with a team losing Santi Rodriguez, trying to find a way to score. Now, they did catch a little bit of a break. Miami got a lead in the 5th minute. They get a red card from the same player who scored, Tomas Avelis. So NYCFC is on the attack. They get a goal from Ilenic in the 26th minute to tie, and he does a Cristiano Ronaldo impression in front of Messi. So that was pretty cool. Adrian Martinez then scores in the 55th minute. You're thinking New York's got the extra player. They're up a goal. They're going to steal 3 points, which would be huge. And Telasco Segovia scores in the 10th minute of stoppage time. Now, why there was 10 minutes of stoppage time, I don't know. I know that we're talking about debating over a handball that took so much time, but that's a little bit too much. Maybe Miami got a little bit of extra time, so to speak. But in the end, you have to be at least thrilled you get a point, especially with the unknown of what this team is, a very tough schedule out of the gate. To steal a point on the road against probably one of the favorite to win MLS Cup, I think that was a really good sign for this team. They will next play on Saturday, 10:30 Eastern, against LAFC. LAFC won against Minnesota, 1-0 over the weekend. So something to keep in mind there. Red Bulls did not have the same fortune. Now, they had a tough opponent as well. They went down to FC Cincinnati to take on a team that just got better in terms of its attacking third, adding Kevin Denke, who scored in the 70th minute on a long ball, which Sandro Schwartz said really that was the only mistake made in the game. And you look at the shots, New York Red Bulls had 15 shot attempts in this game, 3 shots on goal, just could not find a way to get one across the line. But they were one of only 4 teams in the East to not get a point this week. So kind of a setback, but again, you're talking about going on the road against a really tough opponent. You kind of sign up for that. This week will be the Red Bulls home opener. They'll take on Nashville. Nashville drew with New England 0-0 this past week. And actually, when you look at these two teams, the last two times they played twice last year, and nobody scored a goal in either game. So will the third time lead to goals? We shall see. But both teams, I think you have to be, I wouldn't say encouraged with the Red Bulls. You did lose, but to lose 1-0 on the road in the season opener is not the end of the world. They're going to score goals. When you've got Forsberg and Moting and Lewis Morgan, you've got guys that can put the ball in the back of the net. It's just going to be, can they find it on a consistent basis and they get through the season healthy is going to be the big key. Moving over to baseball, let's talk Mets, and a real discouraging news right before we got on the air. Sean Manaea is going to be shut down for the next 2 weeks with an oblique injury. He is going to start the season on the injured list. And that is a major blow because you look at a Met rotation, already doesn't have Frankie Montas till probably mid-May or June. Manaea, you would think maybe May now at this point, he comes back. This Met rotation that had a lot of depth is slowly losing it because now you look at it being Senga, Peterson, Clay Holmes is now your number 3. And Clay Holmes looked good Saturday against the Astros in his spring debut. He threw 3 strong innings, didn't allow any runs, showed off the kick change. It's his new pitch he's got going on, but still, that's your number 3 starter, and you're not really sure if what he can be long-term throughout the year. David Peterson is your 4, and now you're looking at a mix of Tyler McGill, Griffin Canning, Paul Blackburn. And collectively, we saw last year they could be okay with not elite guys, but can they get through the year that way, and can they win in the postseason that way? No. So to lose that, a competitive NL East with the Braves, the Phillies, you think Washington's going to be better to an extent. That's a major blow. And now it begs the question for the Mets. I think you've got to go out and get Jose Quintana. You have to re-sign him. You have to bring him back. You need somebody to get innings. I know the Mets don't want to spend money because they've spent a ton of it this offseason, and they're already the highest payroll in the league. But at some point, you have to get that reunion in place. I think they need the pitching more than ever. If you're not going to make a trade, Quintana is probably the best option that you have at this point. Also, good news for the Mets this week. Juan Soto homered in his spring debut. Now he also started off well for the Yankees last year in the spring. So Mets fans get a taste of what Juan Soto can actually do, which is some good things. Again, not much really to talk about with spring training games. He played a little bit this week. There was another major Mets injury, Nick Madrigal, a fractured shoulder. So he goes on the injured list. Carlos Mendoza saying he's going to be out for a long time. And you look at Madrigal, and with him being out, now the Mets need an option on the bench. And that, I think, helps at least on Acuna, who can kind of play both second, can play some short, move around, kind of like what Madrigal was. You could look at Brett Beatty, meaning that helps him. So they talked, remember last week we talked about the storylines, that log jam of infielders. I mean, that's going to be big for both these teams. Now, well, for both those players. Mets are in action today. They're in Jupiter, Florida. They're against the St. Louis Cardinals. They're actually facing Steven Matz today. And the starter, I'll get you that for the Mets, is Blade Tidwell. It's actually one of their good young pitching prospects. So that'll be a fun one to check out. Meanwhile, in the Bronx, some big news with the Yankees this week, and most of it being, well, off the field. And what was shocking on Friday was the statement from Hal Steinbrenner coming out that the Yankees were going to end their facial hair ban. Now, they're not going to allow those crazy long Brian Wilson, Charlie Blackmon, Jason Worth, Brandon Marsh-like beards. But now they've allowed players to do something they haven't done in a while. Now, Aaron Judge commented saying he's not one that's going to grow a beard. He still kind of looks at it as tradition in a sense. But for some players, and you look at the one in particular that's going to stand out, and Hal said he talked to former players, someone like CeCe Sabathia, who was hesitant to shave coming to New York, and he ended up doing it. But Devin Williams came to camp with a beard, shaved it, said he felt different. And you'd have to think that, and Aaron Boone said it this week, if it's going to cost us any player, it's time to get rid of it. And I think the Yankees are seeing that, hey, this actually means something to players. Like, how many players do you see leave the Bronx and all of a sudden grow beards? Clay Holmes now has one. Gleyber Torres has one now in Detroit. They told Gleyber Torres about it. The media and he thought the media was kidding when that news came out. So anything that allows a player to express themselves, I think that's a big thing. And when I'm watching a baseball player, I'm not really worried about their beard necessarily. I love the old stories like George Steinbrenner telling Lou Pennell, if you could walk across this pond, I'll let you grow a beard. But those days are in the past. And I think the Yankees realized that I was listening to Dan Grossa, I think it was Dan Grossa this week. It was somebody on ESPN radio talking about, well, the Yankees aren't much different. I mean, think about it, they haven't won a World Series in 15 years. You can't necessarily use winning. You can use consistency in winning. You can't use titles anymore. The Yankees are not. They're still a iconic brand, but you have to have players not have reason to come here. And I think the facial hair policy was going to eventually something that cost them marquee players. It allows Garrett Cole to regrow his beard, which was pretty cool with the Astros. So I like the Yankees finally went about this. It was long overdue, and maybe it'll lead. I would love to see the Yankees get some City Connect jerseys. Like I want them to kind of be embracing the time, so to speak, and connect with the younger fan, and connect with more of the people that they're trying. Baseball's trying to grow, and then baseball took a big hit this week. We'll talk about it on Bullpen Bulletin tomorrow night, 9:00. Me, Alden K, and Mike Pat about how baseball just lost out with ESPN, and think about how the sport's going to drastically change with Sunday Night Baseball and ESPN no longer being a thing. So when you're trying to grow the sport, you can't have things like this affect that. So Yankees went about it the right way. The other thing the Yankees did this week, they gave Aaron Boone a 2-year contract extension. That was going to happen. I'm not going to sit here and complain over it. Aaron Boone, in the 7 years he's been here, at least has gotten to a World Series, which was the big rip on him up until last year. This extension would take him into 10 years, which I think is ideally what Brian Cashman wanted. Aaron Boone is the mouthpiece for this team in terms of the media. He deflects pretty well. He sticks up for his players. Now, if they don't win in those next 3 years, Aaron Boone, I don't think will last because, again, you go 10 years without winning a championship. That's something that's uncommon with the Yankees. But Aaron Boone's done enough to stay. I was kind of surprised that he's not. Like I saw a list of Brian Kenny's like top 10 managers. Aaron Boone was not on it. I think he's an okay manager. The only bad move he made last year in the playoffs is the Nestor Cortez, Tim Hill stuff. So to me, he can make bad moves at times, but you understand that a lot of the managers now, it's a collaboration with the front office. So what can we really blame the manager for? And what can we actually credit the manager for? Two totally different things. In terms of Yankees on the field, Paul Goldschmidt, a couple RBIs on Friday. I thought Marcus Stroman looked good. Saturday out in Dunedin against the Blue Jays, Spencer Jones hit a big home run that only happened because the Yankees challenged the ball strike thing, which you're seeing in spring training, which has been quick and fast and actually like it. It'll help the sport, I think, tremendously if it goes into major leagues next year. But Spencer Jones, to me, is a big piece this year, both in the minors and maybe if he plays well this fall. I mean, he can hit. The power's there. He's just got to cut down the strikeouts. That was, I think, a big criticism for Spencer Jones a year ago. Yankees are in action today. Now, that game got pushed back to 4 o'clock because there's rain in the Fort Myers area. Carlos Carrasco, who, of course, will be good depth for the Yankees in AAA, he will get the start against Tanner Houck for the Red Sox. That game is on MLB Network later this afternoon. And then Marcus Stroman tomorrow against Simeon Woods Richardson. Yankees will be in Fort Myers still against the Twins. So some action going on there in the world of baseball. So we'll take one more break. We will talk St. John's. After the break, they have new AP poll has come out. They are number 7, the highest ranking they've had since 1992, since I was born, technically. We will dive into their sweep of UConn, what it means, how close they are to a Big East title, and we'll wrap up the show with a couple other smaller topics. You're listening to New York State Sports and iSports Radio, your direct feed for all the sports. We'll take one more time out and be right back after this.
Are you a fan of Minnesota sports? Do you love the Vikings and hate the Packers? Are you a fan of the Timberwolves, Twins, Wild, Lynx, St. Paul Saints? Here on the Bold North Breakdown, we'll talk about all of those professional teams as well as all the college teams in the area. That's your basketball teams, football, hockey, volleyball, men's and women's sports alike. We talk about them all. Here on the Bold North Breakdown. Join me, your host, Glenn Ritter, every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central to discuss all that is happening in the Minnesota sports scene. Here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Big Mike from Indie Sports Nation. Come hang out with me each and every Friday, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, where we talk things Indiana sports. We talk Colts, Pacers, Fever, Indy Ignite, and we dive into the college scene as well. Boilermakers, Hoosiers, Irish, Bulldogs, and every school in between. But we don't stop there. We'll sprinkle in some NHRA and cover the IndyCar series. From the turf to the hardwood to the track, we got you covered. Come hang out with your boy, Big Mike, each and every Friday, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Indie Sports Nation, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Welcome back to New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all of the sports. Ricky K here with you. Of course, we talk Indie Sports Nation because that's where St. John's will be next on Wednesday against Butler. It's a 9 o'clock tip on CBS Sports Network, and that'll be a huge game for the Johnnies. We'll get into that in a minute. So real quick update, at least on the Rangers side. Zach Jones and Brennan Othman called up from AHL in Hartford. Othman is being called up in case Chris Kreider cannot play. Kreider, as we said earlier, missed Sunday against the Penguins, so be sure to check. So Othman could be in the lineup. That should be a fun spot for him. But let's talk Johnnies, who sweep the Connecticut Huskies and the two-time reigning national champions, 89-75. Yesterday was the final, and Madison Square Garden, which is usually, as UConn tweeted before the game, stores south, was all red yesterday. And it was an absolute dominating performance by St. John's. It took an 18-point lead at the half, led by as many as 20. UConn did cut it to single digits, which was huge. Alex Caravan got the Huskies back in it, but the Red Storm just were relentless, especially on defense. I thought that was a big key for them. That's been a key for them all year. Rick Pitino has said in interviews this week, said it on the documentary, which you saw episode 2 on Vice this week. He has his players watch the Oklahoma City Thunder and how they defend, and it really is a model for what they do. St. John's yesterday forced 18 turnovers, got 24 points off turnovers. Even Danny Hurley said it yesterday. The fact that UConn out-rebounded them and St. John's still won by as much as they did speaks to what the Red Storm did yesterday. They shot 42% from three. They hit 6 threes in the first half. They've been shooting the three very well the last couple of games. If they do that, they're going to be very hard to beat. They were 21 of 27 from the free throw line, much better from the charity stripe, but shot 47%. I mean, that really was the key to getting the win. RJ Lewis, who some thought might not play due to the groin pull, he missed the DePaul game on Wednesday. He had 14 points and 5 boards. Kadari Richmond won Big East Player of the Week this week. He had 18 points. Zubi Ejiofor, 18, 9, and 6 yesterday. Devion Smith, who has been a difference maker since being healthy, and Patino has said as such. 12 points, 7 boards, 8 assists. Just strong performance there, and 13 and 8 from Aaron Scott. So all 5 starters in double figures yesterday. And look, the ceiling is high for this team. As I mentioned before the break, number 7 in the AP poll, that is their highest rating since December 1991. I mean, that's where Rick Pitino has taken this team. We talked about the Connecticut win Wednesday. They were missing a few starters, went to DePaul. Not the game you should win, but they not only won, they won 82-58. in a game where they got 45 rebounds, outboard DePaul by 16, made 9 threes, and forced 16 turnovers. So you look at guys like Abina Ayo, who had 15 points. Never really get to see him much this year. You saw Simeon Wilcher, he had 8 points, shooting a 3. Ruben Prey had 8 boards off the bench. I mean, there's depth there, and if there's not depth from an offensive perspective, it's depth from a defensive perspective. So they have guys, even Lefty was hitting a 3 yesterday. So they can do a bunch of different things, which makes this team successful. So what this means is if St. John's wins Wednesday, which again, that game at Butler at 9 o'clock, their magic number to win the Big East outright is 2. They win against Butler on Wednesday, and they will clinch a share of the Big East title for the first time since 1992. They have Butler Wednesday, and then Seton Hall Saturday. It's a 2:15 tip on CBS. That is also a whiteout at Madison Square Garden. That game got moved from Carnesecca to MSG. They're probably going to sell at MSG. It'll be senior day. It'll be a very eventful day. Rick Pitino, I would think, is going to wear the white suit if they're going to have a whiteout. He hasn't worn that since last year when they beat Creighton. If the Red Storm win these 2 games, they will win the outright Big East title for the first time since 1985, 86, and of course, the great Luke Carnesecca. And I got to think Luke Carnesecca is looking down on this team and really behind this team the whole way. It's just been remarkable what this team's been able to do. And I know I say that every week. If Villanova doesn't hit a crazy 3 late in that game a couple weeks ago, St. John's could go 2 months without losing. It's been an absolute incredible. They can defend with anybody. If they're making threes, they're going to go to the Final Four. Now, it depends on matchup. I think they're definitely a second weekend team. But to dominate UConn the way they did, I know UConn's down, but they've gotten to the Big East. Creighton, I think, is going to be their tough test if they do meet in the Big East tournament championship. They're probably going to be the 1 seed in the Big East tournament in a couple of weeks, which is going to make the Garden electric. And if they win Saturday, they go undefeated at home. I mean, they have turned Madison Square Garden into a home court advantage. And that speaks to really what Rick Pitino has been able to do. I'm going to have a blog post up on Rick Pitino's impact sometime before the Big East tournament here on iesportradio.com. It's going to be a lot of fun, so be sure to check that out. So some love to the Johnnies again. Butler Wednesday, Seton Hall on Saturday. Meanwhile, Rutgers, they've at least given them a pretty good chance to make the Big Ten tournament. They can't save their season, but at least it gives Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey a chance at more national games the rest of the way. Rutgers went on the road to Washington last Wednesday and ended up winning in overtime. That final being 89-85. Dylan Harper had 34 points. He has had a really good week, starting to shine after being injured for the early portion of the year. Bailey had 18. Williams had 13. Rutgers ended up shooting 47% and just made enough plays at the end of the game to get that win. And then yesterday, at home against USC, they win 95-85. Harper goes for 25. Bailey goes for 14. Rutgers makes almost 56% of their shots. So that's a huge win. As I mentioned, it keeps them out of the Big Ten tournament bubble, which again, the bottom 3 teams do not make the Big Ten tournament. Rutgers right now is 7-10 in the league. That's tied with Ohio State. Scarlet Knights right now have 3 games left. They are at Michigan on Thursday. It's a 9 o'clock tip on Peacock. And then that's actually their only game this week. And then they will play next Tuesday at Purdue. So 2 tough road games for Rutgers coming up. That's what made beating Washington and beating USC so critical in getting back on track and actually giving Bailey and Harper a chance in the Big Ten tournament. Other local games, Seton Hall made it interesting late, but they still lose to Xavier 73-66 yesterday at the Prudential Center. They got blown out by Marquette last Tuesday, 80-56. Seton Hall will be home against Villanova Wednesday at 8:30. That's at FS1 before the matchup with St. John's. St. John's, of course, beat Seton Hall earlier this year at Prudential Center by a final of 79-51. I don't know if the Pirates can make up that much ground in that amount of time, but we'll see. As far as the ACC with Syracuse, they ended up taking definitely not a good stretch for the Cuse, as we've mentioned before. They're just not finding their form. They're 11-16 right now. Their last game, they played Pitt last Tuesday. They lost 80-69. They actually started off the game pretty well, ended up folding late. They will host NC State at 7 Eastern on ESPNU on Wednesday, and then they will play Virginia Tech on the road Saturday at noon on the CW network. The other big game this week in college basketball at the Garden, you forgot to talk about it last week. Duke was taking on Illinois. That was a fun, and I love that both John Shire and Brad Underwood kind of scheduled this kind of non-conference game late in the year. It was a good thing for Duke because the ACC, let's be honest, has been weak, and weak is probably putting it nicely for them. So to get a little bit of a breather to kind of see, and Illinois has been banged up and struggling of late, but Duke puts up 54 in the first half. They win 110-67. Cooper Flagg had 16 points, but Duke had 5 players in double figures. Isaiah Evans had 17 off the bench. Illinois was held just 2 for 26 from 3-point range. Look, John Shire has been great for Duke, and I would love a bracket that puts it Prudential Center, Sweet 16, Duke St. John's. That I would love to see that matchup just because I would love to see how Rick Pitino would have him play for Cooper Flagg. But it's clear right now, I think Auburn and Duke are 1-2 in the country. And you look at the AP poll with St. John's being 7, you got a lot of SEC schools in that mix. And if the Johnnies can win these 2 games, think about the carnage that could be that can move them up. Auburn is going on the road to Kentucky this weekend. Texas Tech has games with Houston and Kansas. They're number 10 right now, so Houston's got a little bit of a tough slate coming up. You got Alabama at Tennessee this weekend. So the SEC is going to really mess where St. John's could realistically, if they win these 2 games, be a top 5 team next week. Like I wouldn't be shocked by that. I mean, to me, I think they're a 3 seed in the tourney. Maybe have a shot at a 2. We'll see. NFL Combine this week in Indianapolis. All eyes, especially for the Giants, are going to be on the quarterback situation. What goes on with Shedeur Sanders? Shedeur Sanders reportedly is not going to throw. He did not throw at the East Shrine game. He is going to wait till his pro day. So we'll see if Cam Ward decides to throw. But all eyes going to be on the Giants' rumor mill with the quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford, of course, the Rams giving him permission to kind of look for trade value, what his value is. I think Stafford will stay with the Rams, but of course, the Giants will be on alert for that. We'll see what Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji say at the Combine this week. Jets, Jackson Dart's been a name that's been thrown out there for the Jets. We'll see. They'll be looking, I think, at the quarterbacks as well. As much as the best players available, I think at 7. Giants think would be the team, I think, more inclined to get their quarterback of the future in this draft. So we'll have more of an update what we hear from Indy next week as to what might happen. This is the next big event, and we get to free agency in a couple of weeks. So that's why the NFL kind of on the back burner. But we'll wrap up the show with, of course, there was a historic sports event, had its anniversary this week. Saturday was 45 years ago, the Miracle on Ice in Lake Placid, the U.S. beating the Soviets in the semifinals of the Olympics. Of course, it takes a lot of people to remember that that was not the gold medal game, that the U.S. actually beat Finland, was down against Finland in the gold medal game to win. And people compared the 4 nations this past week to Miracle on Ice. I can't go that direction because, again, I don't know if international hockey is going to necessarily get people to watch the NHL. But I was watching Canada-U.S. the other day, and I was entertained by it. And you look at best versus best. Like you're having right now, like in baseball, the World Baseball Classic qualifiers are on. And I love the World Baseball Classic. I don't care that it's during spring training because I want to see the best players for the U.S. playing against the best players for the Dominican Republic. And I love that 4 nations kind of replaced the All-Star game. But the atmosphere in Boston on Thursday was absolutely electric. You had Mike Ruzioni, who had the game-winning goal against the Soviets, come out in a Johnny Gaudreau jersey, which was, you had the crowd chanting Johnny Hockey in the 3rd period. Now, I wish Austin Matthews would have actually scored against Jordan Binnington. But, of course, Connor McDavid has his Sidney Crosby-like moment in overtime. But Miracle on Ice was not only a great event in sports, it's great in this country. Like, think about all the pride to this country when that happened. A group of college kids beat Tretiak, the Soviet goalie, was the best goalie in the world. And they found a way to get him pulled at the end of the 1st period. So that's an event to me. Like, when you look at time machines, there are two two events I would love to go back in time to see in person. One would be Miracle on Ice in 1980 actually. The other would be Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. I would love to go back in time to watch that old, like Brooklyn Dodgers, when baseball was really king in New York during those times. So definitely a good time to look back on that. And then real quickly, the New York Sirens, the PWHL team, actually played a game this weekend in Buffalo. So the Rangers got embarrassed in Buffalo. The Sirens did not get embarrassed in Buffalo. They ended up losing to Boston 3-2 in overtime in the shootout. Right now, New York is in a little bit of a tailspin. They've lost 5 and actually I believe 6. They've been on an epic tailspin. Right? Look at it right now. They've lost I think like 7 in a row. Trying to find their footing there against Ottawa on Wednesday at TD Place. But I was on with the Neutral Zone a couple weeks ago, and those kind of events, when you get PWHL games at different venues, like something like Buffalo, it's going to grow the game. Buffalo's a hockey town. You've seen games in Denver. Like having neutral site games where you're going to draw a great crowd is going to help. So good job by the Sirens and Boston putting that game together this week. So that's going to be 9 is in the books. Next week, we hit another milestone, 80 episodes. As this show continues to grow with the support of all of you, of course, we'll keep an eye on the Knicks and the Rangers. Of course, Knicks failed their midterm exam. Of course, they're going to try now to study for the final, which would be in the playoffs. Rangers, meanwhile, can they get something against the Islanders this week? Trying to keep themselves in the playoff mix. Of course, next Friday is the trade deadline. We'll preview that. What do all three locals exactly look for at the deadline? We will dive into that. The Mets and the Yankees, of course, they can't afford any more injuries to the starting rotation. Montas out, Manaea out. Key is going to be to stay healthy. How they balance that, we'll see. Yankees will start to see Aaron Judge playing some games this weekend. Austin Wells playing some games this weekend. Maybe we see Garrett Cole. So we're starting to get close. And Jason Dominguez, as he continues to learn left field, we'll monitor that. We'll monitor the combine. We'll monitor St. John's. Again, 1 win from sharing the Big East, 2 wins away from winning their first outright Big East title since 1985. As the legend of St. John just keeps on going. Again, special thanks to Charles Bone from MLSsoccer.com for hopping on, talking NYCF team. The Red Bulls, NYCFC is talking out in LA this week. Red Bulls, 2 straight games against Nashville. They've tied 0-0. Will they actually score on Nashville this time in their home opener at Sports Illustrated Arena in Harrison, New Jersey? Be sure to check that out. And of course, Gotham FC coming up in mid-March. As we get closer, we'll look into them. Thanks to all those who tuned in this week. Got a great lineup in store for you tonight. Set Point, Chi-Town Weekly, The Extra Mile, Carolina Sports Update. So many shows coming up on a Monday. For Larry B and all of our IE Sports Radio team, I'm Ricky K saying enjoy the rest of your week. Happy end of February. And I'll see you next week when March begins.